Hey everyone, welcome to my video. For those of you that don't normally follow my channel, my name is Siobhan and I'm from New York City and I've been making videos on YouTube since 2010. I recently graduated from the Aveda Cosmetology School on Spring Street between Varick and 6th Avenue, and in my opinion I received an outstanding education, and because of that I felt like I wanted to share a little bit of those experiences and make a vlog about what it was like to be in cosmetology school. So that's sort of what this video will be today. At the moment I'm not working in a salon, but that's due to some scheduling conflicts that surround my daughter. I'm hoping that in September I'll be able to look for some steady salon work, but for right now I'm freelancing, and if you happen to be in the New York City area and you'd like to work with me, I'll have all my contact information in the underbar below. But right now that's not really what this video is about, so I'm just gonna go and get started. There's going to be an index somewhere around my face, and you can skip ahead to points that you're a little bit more interested in, or rewind or fast forward. That'll be entirely up to you. I just thought I would throw that out there. So as I said, I started making videos in 2010, and it was somewhere around 2013, the middle of that year, that I felt like I'd reached the end of what I could learn on my own. And it was around that time that I started to have the itch to go to school. I really loved what I was doing, but I wanted to be as professional about it as I could be, and I felt the only way to do that would be to get some sort of higher education and probably a license. And so my husband and I started doing a little bit of research, and we socked some money away. I couldn't go to school immediately because of my child. I've been a stay-at-home parent for a while, and my daughter has some educational needs, so it's great that I've been able to be home. But I wanted to do something that I loved. I wanted to get out of the house, and I also wanted to just, pursue a career that I could be proud of. And I wanted my daughter to watch me do it. So that's kind of how I ended up going to school. I did a lot of research on schools in Manhattan, and I settled on Aveda because I really loved the mission. First and foremost, Aveda is a reputable company and the products really do what they say they do. The ingredients are from communities all over the world, and Aveda is cruelty-free. They go into different countries and they outsource materials and ingredients while providing jobs and while not exploiting the people that are working for them, and that's really, really important to me. But I also loved the idea of natural beauty and sort of just enhancing what you already have. And I really wanted to work for a company that handled all kinds of hair types, and this is because I had a friend who told me a couple of times how she would walk into salons with her very curly textured hair and be turned away, and that's kind of stuck with me. And not to mention that my best friend happens to be an African American woman, and I grew up watching her get her hair done, and I wanted to be able to not only sort of work on my hair texture type, but also on hers. And she currently lives in Minneapolis, but I'm hoping that the next time she comes to visit me, I'll be able to cut and style her hair. I think that'll be like sort of full circle, because it was Dana who originally taught me how to braid. My general impressions when I first walked into the Institute were really positive. Everybody that I spoke to was professional, funny, kind, relatable. I noticed everyone was dressed in black. I knew that would be the school's uniform, so that took a second to get used to because I prefer color. I have a lot of black in my wardrobe right now, and I think I probably will for forever, which kind of sucks because I'm into color. I think I felt intimidated during the tour when we walked into the dispensary because there are obviously colors of boxes, scales, different kinds of tools that I hadn't seen or used or worked with before. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my god, I'll never know how to use this stuff and I'll never be good at this. But I do understand color. It's not my favorite thing, but I think that says a lot about the education that I received from Aveda, the fact that I walked in feeling so scared, like I'd never learn how to do it, and I've come out with a really good understanding. And obviously I'm still only at the very beginning of my professional career, so I anticipate that I'm going to learn a lot more. There was also an entry test, which was made me laugh because I hadn't taken an entry test into any kind of school in like over a decade. It was reading and math, and I think it was just meant to make sure that I could speak English and add and subtract. So it really ended up not being a very big deal. Aveda provides two different kinds of programs. They provide the cosmetology program and the esthetician program. Obviously, I chose cosmetology, and there are two different schedules. The state of New York mandates 1,000 hours for their cosmetologists, so the daytime course is something like, I think, Tuesday through Saturday, 9 to 5, something like that, and it's finished in 8 months. And the part-time class is Monday through Thursday, 5:45 to 9:45, so it's 4 nights a week, 4 hours a night, and it takes 15 months. I chose the night course mostly because I wanted to still be home during the day for my child and my husband. I have been home since she was born, so I felt like I needed to ease my child and my spouse into me not being home, so I thought the part-time would be better. And I have to say that I really enjoyed the part-time, even though it was a longer course. It took over a year to complete. I think it's because I had more time to learn some of the material. I have to imagine that it's really difficult in the daytime sometimes because the material that we are learning is so extensive and there's so much of it. And it's kind of like a 2-for-1 in that we're learning the state curriculum, but we're also learning Aveda's curriculum. So it's like a 2-for-1. And all of that material in 8 months, I can't even imagine it. I'm glad that I had double that time to sort of learn. I started on September 8th, 2014, and on my first night I received my cosmetology kit, and that was part of my tuition. Inside the kit I received a Salon hairdryer, a flat iron, a Marcel iron. I got 4 human hair mannequins and a stand. I had my color bowls and brushes, my round brushes, my cutting combs, my shears. I had pin curl clips, duckbill clips, sectioning clips. I got a number of Aveda products. And this was really cool because I did take some of them home to try out, and that sort of helped me, or like kind of paved the way for me to understand some of the Aveda products that I would be using in school and or trying to sell to my guests. I also got a number of state mandated textbooks and Aveda mandated textbooks, so I think in total there was like something like 5 or 6 books, which I had not expected, and something like 4 or 5 workbooks. And the workbooks were also pretty detailed, and we were graded on them as well. This is one of my state-mandated textbooks. This is Milady. I feel like if you've been to any cosmetology school anywhere in the country, you're probably familiar with Milady in some form. And you can see that this is a pretty detailed textbook. It has everything that you could possibly imagine that relates to cosmetology. And I think I forgot to mention that my cosmetology license also covers nails and skin, so I received a little bit of makeup and a nail kit. Obviously my preference, or I think my preference is obviously with hair, but it was nice to learn those things too. We were encouraged to add to our kits during the entirety of the course. A lot of us traded in our Salon hair dryers for like twin turbos or I guess more powerful professional tools. I eventually bought 2 pairs of scissors that were a little better than the ones that came in my kit. But I can't say anything bad about the equipment that was in it initially. I think it's just a really good introduction into some of the products and tools that most stylists use. The coursework itself was divided up into phases. So we had Intro 1 and 2, Alpha 1 and 2, Beta 1 and 2, and Gamma. This was really great because the end of each phase felt like an accomplishment, and each phase included new challenges, new material, so it was nice not to be bombarded with all of it at once. You were able to add and build to all of the knowledge that you were getting over a period of time, so that was sort of a relief not to have it all at once. Intro 1 and 2 was pretty much heavy bookwork. We learned a lot about state laws, keeping our equipment tidy, cleanliness. It was a lot of paper writing. We did a lot of teach-backs within our class. There was a lot of lecture, note-taking. I think during the anatomy portion, we kind of started with general anatomy of the body, and then we went to like more specific anatomy, so like the anatomy of the skin and then of the hair. And I have to say that as a former EMT, I was really impressed with how detailed some of it was. I think some of my younger counterparts in class, the ones that were seeing the material for the first time, were a little overwhelmed, whereas I had a tiny bit of a jump start just because I was familiar with some of the stuff that we were already learning. But it was really intense. I would say the first couple of weeks dragged out, and it wasn't always easy to be in class, especially at night. But yeah, I'm glad that we got all of the information that we got during that time, because it really, really helped later down the road. Aveda really believes in sort of a full salon experience, and so one of the things that they do, sort of our first hands-on work, is these sort of massage techniques. Aveda has very specific hand massages and scalp and shoulder massages, and so we would practice these on one another at the start of class, which was, we called it wellness, but it was also sort of learning these steps that we would use on paying clients later down the road in our cosmetology career. And that was really nice. It kind of broke up some of the monotony of the bookwork. And then we moved into shampooing. We didn't often get to work on one another. That wasn't really sort of the rules of the school. They didn't really like us to work on one another. But we did have a workshop for shampoo and blowouts on each other, and that was nice. But most of the time we were learning on our mannequins. And shampooing surprised me because, you think that you know how to do it because you shampoo your hair in the shower every day, but there really is all of this technique that's involved, and it's not as easy as it sounds. So that did take a minute to kind of get used to. I think it's weird thinking that you know how to do something and then realizing that actually you don't. So yeah, shampooing kind of surprised me. After that, we moved into what Aveda calls the 6 sections. And that's basically learning how to section hair in preparation for a haircut. And I feel like it's a little bit more detailed than most stylists probably use. I like the 6 sections, but you don't necessarily need 6 sections for every single head that you work on. And some haircuts will be totally different, and you might not need those sections at all. But it's an integral part of learning how to cut hair. And that too was a little bit more difficult than I had anticipated, especially since I've been practicing upstyles for so long and I'm so used to sectioning my own hair. I thought it would come really naturally, but it didn't. So that did take, I would say, a good week to sort of master. First haircut that we learned was the one length, which is sort of the most important, I think, or it's the one that kind of leads up into all the other haircuts, and it's super important. And I have to say that by the time that we got to the one length haircut, we were weeks into school and ready for hands-on work. So it was absolutely thrilling getting to sort of set up the mannequins and take out the scissors and really start cutting. But it didn't come naturally the way that I thought it would. And there is a whole technique to it. There's different ways that you can do it, but I really love the way that Aveda taught me. And I'll probably use that method for most, if not all, of my career, I think. After that, we were taught a handful of haircuts, and most of the haircuts that we learned were the ones that normal people ask for when they come into the salon. So long layers, long round layers, concave graduation, natural graduation, short round layers, and faceted layers, and there's like a couple different variations of faceted layers. The idea is that you memorize them step by step by step, so that when it comes to actually applying them to a guest, you can put them together in pieces if you need to, so that you can customize the haircut for whoever is sitting in your chair. So for example, I could give someone a haircut where it's long layers in front and long round in back, or like short round on top and faceted on the sides. We learned how to do the cuts through several different mediums, through pictures and books, through video, through demonstrations in class by our instructors, and I think it's great that Aveda did it this way because we kind of covered all of the bases, and I think everybody learns differently, so having all these different resources was really helpful. We rehearsed each cut for weeks at a time, and we would cut as little hair off our mannequins as possible because they're like $55 to $60 a pop. And I think that might have frustrated me a little bit in the beginning because, I would cut the hair and I'd want to see a real result at the end. But you don't really see very much when you're only taking half an inch off of the hair. But it was more, I think in the beginning, it was more about learning how to hold your fingers, whether you were holding it at 90 degrees, following your guide, is it traveling guide, stationary guide, stuff like that. So yeah, it was definitely challenging in the beginning, but the cuts really came naturally to me. I loved them. During the middle of Intro 2, we were asked to provide models, and the idea was that we were going to do 4 of the sort of most used haircuts, most basic haircuts, and the models that we were providing, most of them were friends or family. And the idea was it was kind of meant to give us an understanding of what it would be like to work in a salon setting. And of course we were also being graded. I should say that we were pretty much graded on everything we did, whether it was written or practical. When it came to hands-on work, we were really sort of graded mostly on the effort that we put forth, whether or not we followed all of Aveda's rituals, whether or not our guest liked their haircut was irrelevant, because it was really mostly about sort of following the steps and making sure that we understood them. And if we did make mistakes, we always had our instructors there to kind of correct them. Not to mention that all guests have to sign a waiver, and I know that sounds awful, but knowing that they signed the waiver and that it wasn't really about what they liked, that kind of took the pressure off of us initially. My first models were all friends and family. So my girlfriend Anush came in for the long layered haircut, then she came in for concave graduation. I did the faceted layers on my husband, I did short round on my mom, and then I did a single process color on my mom. So it was my girlfriend, my husband, and my mom that came in to be my first sort of, shall we say, victims? No, my first guests. I have to say that terrible mistakes are possible at cosmetology school, especially since you're dealing with students, some of whom have never colored or cut hair before. It's something that you need to be aware of when you go in to a cosmetology school for a service. But I have to say that my class was very, very talented. They had a very good understanding, a natural understanding of cosmetology, and I didn't really see any huge mistakes pretty much the entire time that I was there. So I think that's a good thing. I will say I saw a few color errors, but sometimes that wasn't just a mistake, it was that the guest came in with sort of poor hair to start with, and hairstylists aren't magicians. Whether they're cosmetology students or master colorists or stylists, sometimes you just can't make things that the guest wants possible. So sometimes it wasn't a student's fault. With cuts, it was sometimes connecting the front to the back. That was challenging. But also, a lot of us were very cautious and responsible in the beginning, and we didn't cut as much hair as we should have. I think there's this common misconception that students will sometimes cut too much hair, but that was not the case for myself or my classmates. We were very, very careful, and sometimes we wouldn't cut enough. And our instructor was constantly coming around and telling all of us that you just gotta go for it, you just gotta go for it. And I think that having that encouragement really helped. But in the beginning, we were all a little bit nervous about really, really cutting hair, taking a noticeable amount off. With blowouts, I saw some limp blowouts. I think I made a couple in the beginning too. It's now, having spent months working with a round brush and a hairdryer, I can tell you there's so much more to it than you would imagine. And it really does take some skill and practice. I'm still not totally 100% up to par. I hope that I can continue to improve my skills in this department, because if you give a great haircut and you give a terrible blowout, it kind of sort of negates all the wonderful work that you've done. So it's a very integral part of a beauty service. And a lot of us made kind of sort of pathetic looking blowouts in the beginning. Our teachers would joke around and say that we would make at least one person cry during our career, and it would probably happen at school. But thankfully that didn't happen to me, nor did it happen to any of my classmates that I know of. I hope that doesn't happen. I think the way to avoid this is just kind of to listen to your guest and to see, to find out what's okay and not okay with them. And if you can communicate you can probably avoid that, and that's my goal, is to like never make anyone cry. I really hope that that doesn't ever happen to me. Off the top of my head, I think the biggest mistakes I ever made on a guest happened on my husband, actually. He came in to be my faceted layered model, and he is like 6'2" and really, really wide. My cape didn't fit him, so I had it all kind of tucked around him with like suction clips down the back. And I brought him to the bowl for a shampoo, and I soaked the back of him. I didn't make the seal with the neck, and he didn't say anything, and I only noticed at the very end of the service that there was like a puddle under the chair, and the back of his sweater was totally soaked. And he said to me that he didn't tell me because he didn't want to hurt my confidence, which is so sweet. But it was really, really embarrassing because I was so excited to have him there, and I really wanted to give him this awesome service. And not to mention, I made a hole in the back of his hair here. I didn't take the cowlicks that he had into consideration because I wasn't experienced enough yet to do that. But thankfully, my instructor came over with some texture shears and fixed it. But I think my biggest mistakes happened on my husband, go figure. And funny enough, he walked out of the school and was telling all of our family and friends that he got a $20,000 haircut because that's the cost of school. And it's just this sort of running joke between us. Learning color kind of happened at the end of Intro 2 going into Alpha 1, and it completely and totally blew all of our minds. It came very naturally to some of my classmates, and not so much to others, myself included. My teacher at the time was telling me that this was the first class that she'd had in a long time where she had more cutters than colorists. And so that was kind of nice, sort of knowing that I wasn't alone in feeling confused, because it was so abstract. I'm a very technical person. I like rules. I like knowing where things will fall. I can kind of look at the shape of someone's head and understand immediately why the pin curl has to go here, or why the braid has to fold that way, or why I have to cut the angle this way, or what the outcome of a haircut will look like before I even do it. Whereas with color, it was just so abstract. That it felt kind of unpredictable too, because I feel like you can do the same sort of color service on 1,000 different clients, but then at 1,001 it'll turn green. It just happens like that. I'm sure the same could be said for haircuts, but I guess I don't feel the same sort of anxiety that I do with haircuts and upstyles as I feel with color sometimes. But I will say that Aveda's color is amazing. I believe it's 97% plant derived, it's all natural, and it comes in different pieces, so it's extremely customizable. I was told in advance that if I mastered Aveda's color line, it would be like learning how to drive in Manhattan. I would understand every color line from here on in. So I hope that's true. I haven't worked with any other color lines yet, but I have a lot of interest in Wella and Pravana right now, and so I'm hoping to kind of start to practice with those color lines as well. This is the color chart. This is the full spectrum permanent color chart, so you can see, and this is really great. This came in my kit, and it obviously has rules about everything, processing times, ingredients, amounts, everything. And I also had one for the semi-permanent line, and this is kind of funny because I still have the notes that myself and another classmate made kind of stuck to it, and I think I'm just going to keep them there sort of like a souvenir or like a remembrance. There's definitely more to color than people think. It's not infallible, and it doesn't always turn out the way that you want it to. In my opinion, reds are definitely the trickiest, and red-haired guests can be kind of hard to work with, at least the ones that I've dealt with so far. Brunettes are sort of the same too. They can be or they can look and hope for things that aren't so realistic. And surprisingly, blondes are the easiest, and I think it's probably because whether or not you're a bottle blonde or a natural blonde, and it doesn't matter if you're a dark blonde or sort of like a level 10, very, very light blonde, we're kind of used to seeing our hair oxidize through the course of a year, and we know that things don't always turn out the way they're supposed to. So I've found that most blonde clients are, when it comes to color, actually a little bit more easy to deal with than redheads and brunettes. Because going darker isn't really The challenge is always going lighter. Hair color has its own sort of natural pigment, and we call it NRP at school and in the salon, so that's natural remaining pigment. And anytime you lighten hair, it kind of kicks back this sort of natural pigment, and that's kind of what you're that's kind of what you're battling. So it can be different for any hair tone. So sometimes it's red, sometimes it's orange, sometimes it's red, orange, or pale yellow. It just kind of depends on what you start with. And that's where it's essential to understand the tones and the colors and how to mix things and in what sort of form you're going to put it onto the hair or how you're going to create the service. You got to really go into it knowing all of your options. And that is definitely challenging. I think it's one of those things you really just sort of have to memorize. I had to memorize the chart completely, and it wasn't till like way down the line that I really started to begin to understand what it was that I was doing. And I think it's just something that I was learning through hands-on work, and hopefully I'll continue to feel more confident and get better with that as I work on guests. At the end of the course, Aveda gives you a certificate, sort of like a diploma, that says that you've met 1,000 hours and that you've passed with good grades. I think passing at Aveda is 80, whereas with the state, I believe it's 70. I'm not sure, but I know that it's definitely not 80. So Aveda kind of sets the bar high, and in doing that, they make you work. And by doing that, it sort of prepares you in advance so that when you actually do take the state practical and written exam, you will pass. I know that Aveda has a really good turnout. The practical exams were challenging in that every couple of weeks, I think we did 5 or 6 of them, I would have to pack up my suitcase, put all of my kit into my suitcase, and drag it to school because our lockers were small and I didn't have room to keep my Stateboard kit there. And so I'd have to bring all this stuff on the 6 train. But each time I took the test, I felt more confident, stronger, I didn't feel afraid, and I don't feel like it's a very big deal, so that's a good thing. And I think that, I'm not sure if other schools do that in the Manhattan area, but that was one of the reasons I chose Aveda too, is because I knew that they would drill the Stateboard tests into our brains, along with whatever education we were receiving. So beauty school drama is a real thing. Who knew? I hadn't been in school in years, and so leading up to going back to school, I talked a little bit about it with some of my friends who are already licensed cosmetologists, and they kept telling me that it was real and I didn't believe them, and I was reading up on it because I was interested in like sort of the social aspects of beauty school, and I found all these wild, crazy stories, and still I did not believe that this was possible until I actually went to school and found out that yes, in fact, beauty school drama is a real thing. I was really excited about working with women. We had a couple of guys in our school, but it was a very female-oriented sort of atmosphere. Even the instructors were mostly women. I think we had maybe like 1 or 2 male teachers that would show up once in a while on the clinic floor. But for the most part, we were dealing consistently with women, and women aged like 18 to like 45, so like a huge age sort of range. And I was the 3rd oldest in my class, and I didn't really get involved in any drama, and for the most part, the classmates, I can't say anything bad about them because I love them all. They all feel like family. I know I'm gonna know them all for forever. We started off with something like 30 students, but like towards the middle of the course, like 10 had dropped out. So that sort of core group at the end, we were really tight. I think there were 2 girls in our class that didn't get along at all, but they managed to kind of avoid each other at the end, like not work next to each other, not talk to each other, and that just kind of kept everything sort of running smoothly. But it is a real thing, and you know, over the course of 15 months, things happen. We were consistently in the same space. It's not like normal college, it's trade school, so like, you know, you don't get any breaks, and you don't really get any vacations, and you're constantly together every single night. And yeah, when things would happen, there would be like a period of a few weeks where there might be some tension, and you could feel that, and it was, you know, when that would happen, it would really affect the team, and so I didn't like that. But thankfully, I think I can count on my one hand how many times that might have happened over 15 months. And usually we all would get over it because, you know, at the end of the day, we were all going through the same thing and struggling towards this one specific goal. So I have to say that even if we had a couple of minutes of bullshit, like at the end, we were all really tight, and I'm grateful for that. There are a lot of diva-like personalities in this industry, as there are in all artistic communities. Some will be helpful and supportive, others won't be. And there seems to be a real hierarchy in the salon sort of business, especially in New York City, and that's good and bad. At the end of the day, it's just sort of about doing the best that you can and doing it with a very positive attitude, because really, it's not brain surgery, we're just doing hair. I will say that it's amazing to be part of a loving team because salons are small and the stations are often close together. So when you're standing in between two people or two colleagues that really, really like you or whom you really like, it makes a world of difference, especially when you're taking a client into your chair who you know will be difficult. Just having that sort of silent emotional support from the person on the right and the person on the left, that makes a world of difference. Imagine standing in between two people that don't like you and working on someone who also is giving you a hard time. So I think it pays to kind of work through whatever drama that you go through, and thankfully my class was mature enough to do that. But yes, beauty school drama is a real thing. Was I nervous the first time I did a haircut? And I will say yes, because the first time was on my girlfriend and I really didn't want to screw up her hair. But besides that, I really didn't get nervous, especially with the cuts. I think I surprised myself because it came very, very naturally to me. I did feel nervous sometimes, but it was usually because I was picking up the energy of the person in my chair. I've never discussed this on my channel before, and it's not because it's some sort of a secret, it's just, it doesn't really fit into the content I normally upload here, but I am a highly sensitive person. I'm like in that, I don't know, 10 or 20 percentile. And so what I mean by that is I absorb other people's feelings. I can walk into a room and within 5 to 30 seconds tell you what's going on. I can tell you who I'll get along with, who I won't get along with, why. If my husband's feeling sad, I'm sad. If my child's anxious, I'm anxious. I pick up energies like that. And I think one of the challenges for me as a highly sensitive person was learning how to touch. I really had to learn how to sort of disassociate myself from the feelings of the person in the chair, because if I was working with someone who came across as sort of hostile or nervous, I immediately picked up those energies and kind of reciprocated them. And obviously that's not a good thing. So there was a lot of personal growth once I got onto the clinic floor, and that happened sometime in May. And it took a couple of weeks to kind of get the swing of that, and I'm still working on that because it's something that I can't really help. As a highly sensitive person, I often have to be alone for a great period of time each day so that I can kind of recharge my brain. And sometimes I can come across as being a little bit aloof because I just sort of shut people out because I can't handle all of the energy. So it was something that I was working on pretty much consistently and personally during my entire, I guess, clinic floor experience. I'd say there's also a lot to be said about learning how to be patient and kind. I think the first guest, the first client that I really had, she sat in my chair and she presented a legit case of cradle cap. And it was absolutely horrifying going through her hair and just seeing these sort of huge chunks of plaque on her scalp, and sort of kind of standing behind her and trying to stay calm and focused without making her feel bad, because she was obviously so self-conscious and worried about what it was that I was going to think of her. And once I realized how insecure she felt over the whole thing, that sort of brought me back down to earth, and I think I was as professional as I could be, but that was a challenge, and we got through it together. She got the service that she wanted, and I sterilized my tools at the end, and it was really no big deal, but just learning how to kind of be kind and patient, I can't reiterate that enough. It's really, really important because this is an industry that is based on touch and socializing and yeah, all the things that human beings do in a social setting, except that we're working on them at the same time. I hope that made sense. As a highly sensitive person, I kind of started to make these categories of different kinds of clients in my head. That way I was prepared for them when they sat down in my chair, and I came up with little game plans so I knew how in advance to sort of tackle them. And I thought it might be fun for me to share some of my little sort of stories or categories with you. If you are a stylist yourself, you're probably familiar with some of the types of people that come into a salon, and maybe you'll have some pointers for me too, so please feel free to leave that in the comments below. The first kind of client on my list is the sleeper, and they are definitely by far my favorite, and the reason for it is there is no bigger compliment than knowing that your touch is so relaxing and that your guest is so comfortable with you that they can actually fall asleep in your chair. And generally speaking, sleepers tend to be confident and easygoing and laid back. They're sort of like go with the flow, kind of like they'll come in and during consultation they'll have a plan, but if they don't have a plan, they listen to you. They definitely value your input, and they're sort of like, okay, let's do that, and they sit back and they relax, and they're usually very quiet. They're also super polite, and yeah, it's just kind of pleasant working with these sort of clients. Next category of client are the talkers, and there's sort of two subcategories underneath it. So the first kind of talker is awesome, and they basically want to come into the salon and have a really great service, but they also want to have a friend while they're in the salon having that service. They like to talk about pop culture, so movies, books, films. They'll talk about their friends and family, their jobs. They will ask you all sorts of questions. They want you to be involved in the conversation, and they kind of like to keep it light, which is really pleasant. These kind of talkers seem to be genuinely appreciative of your compliments, and they can be assertive during the consultation, meaning they know exactly what they want, but sometimes they don't. And in the cases that they don't really know what they want, they do value your opinion, and that's really nice, always. The second kind of talker is a little less easygoing. I don't want to use the word narcissistic, but I think I might have to. And they can either be vain or narcissistic, and yes, there is a difference between the two. I know that generally we use both of those words to kind of connotate the same sort of feeling, but there is a difference between someone who's vain and someone who's narcissistic. They only want to talk about themselves. They don't really care about what you have to say. You are literally a prop behind the chair. They don't really care about your opinions, although they will make a show of it sometimes, like they do care, but they really don't. And they can either be really forthright about what it is that they want, or they'll make you guess, and that can be really tricky too. These kind of talkers never ever hesitate to get angry, to complain, or to leave a stingy tip. They can be incredibly unpredictable, and for most of that kind of a service, I just sort of try to tune them out as best I can and just do the work at hand and get them out of my chair as quickly as possible. And I know that's terrible to say, but that's me being a human being and just telling you guys the truth. Then you've got the readers and the texters, and they're kind of on par with the sleepers, but they can also be either kind of talker as well. Silence from a reader or a texter is really nice in the sense that you get to sort of concentrate and enjoy your work. But one of the disadvantages to working with a guest like this is that they oftentimes will do this with their head, and that can be really, really annoying, and it can turn into a battle where you're constantly adjusting them and they're constantly going back into this sort of a position. So that is the only sort of downside with that. I found that with the readers and the texters, they are immediately warmer when you offer them a phone charger or inquire about their book. They seem to really like those sort of questions. Then you've got your nervous, sad, and insecure guests, and these are hard people to work on sometimes, and kindness really goes a long way with them. I try to make eye contact, I try to smile a lot, and I oftentimes will touch them warmly on the shoulder because I just want them to know that I'm on their side. Sometimes you'll come across someone who knows what they want, but most of the time they don't. And I find that with these sort of guests, more is or less is more. So we usually stick to sort of natural hair colors and cut less hair off. You can often spot these guests by their physical appearance, meaning they're not generally super trendy. Maybe sometimes their clothes are a little outdated, and that's not necessarily true for every single person. I certainly had several girls come and sit in my chair, one of whom had boots that cost more than my life, and she was super nervous and shy, and painfully so. But generally speaking, they're maybe not on par with some of the fashion trends that are on right now. And so you can imagine that it's intimidating for them to walk into a salon where all the stylists are constantly on trend, because it's our job to be, and to walk into a setting where you maybe don't feel cool or you don't feel pretty, and kind of put your hope and trust into somebody who might even be younger than you. That can be difficult for some guests. They're also not stupid, and they will sometimes open up and tell you wonderful stories. I have an example. A classmate of mine had a guest who was painfully shy and a little strange, and she opened up to her and told her this really sort of sad love story about someone she had fallen in love with when she was young, and he died. And it was this crazy story, and I remember talking to this fellow classmate, and she really didn't appreciate what had happened. She'd experienced something super profound. This woman had trusted her with such a beautiful story, and I felt like my classmate really didn't appreciate it. And I thought to myself, like, wow, God put that person in your chair for a reason, and you're really not getting it. That person should have come to me. So those are definitely cool. They're definitely cool moments with guests that are shy and insecure, because when they open up and tell you so many beautiful, wonderful things, and when they're finished, they're usually really, really appreciative, like genuinely appreciative of the work that you've done on them, and that feels really good. So I do enjoy working with these guests, even when it can be kind of sad for me too. Then you've got the quiet observers, and who knows with those guys. Sometimes they zone out staring at you in the mirror, and then other times they are obviously watching you. This is a service industry. You have to get used to people that will look at you and watch you. Most of the time it's not meant to make you feel uncomfortable. I think in total I might have had 2 guests who kind of like creeped me out a little bit, but in those cases, and I know this might sound terrible, I took advantage of the fact that my chair moved, and I would kind of move the chair and say, oh, excuse me, the cord for my blow dryer is a little short, and that would help me get through the service a little quicker. But you gotta be confident. You have to understand what it is that you're doing. Most of the time they're just curious. Sometimes quiet observers will ask you questions, but more often than not they won't. They can be hard to read, so you might not necessarily know if they like what you've done or dislike it unless till the end. So yeah, these guys can go either way, but I've found that the quiet observers are generally pretty easy to work with. They just stare, and that can be kind of intimidating in the beginning. Then we have everyone's favorite, and that is the complainers, and I think that anybody who's been in the service industry knows what a complainer looks like, sounds like, and acts like. I think a really good example would be I had a guest in my chair once, and we were having a great conversation. She seemed to be like the type 1 talker, and I brought her to the shampoo bowl, and she started to tell me that she'd been coming to Aveda forever, and that it was going downhill because there were all these students with multicolored hair and tattoos, and what's up with that grunge look. I was silently screaming in my head, well, you know, cosmetology is kind of like an art form, and artistic people tend to do crazy things with their appearance, including getting tattoos. I myself have tattoos. It just seemed like a really stupid thing to complain about, and it was sort of all downhill from there. The only thing you can do with complainers is kind of just smile and nod and get through the service as quickly as you can. And then you have your bullies. And bullies they think they know everything. They think they know how to do your job. And oftentimes they want you to perform services on their hair that would be compromising to the integrity of their own hair. So for example, it'll be somebody who wants you to color their hair after a perm, or it's somebody who wants you to overlap bleach on already bleached hair. And if you feel confident going into that kind of a service and you feel like you can get through it and do a good job and not cause all of their hair to fall out or break, then go for it. But if you feel like you can't do that or you feel uncomfortable with it, remember it's your license on the line. And this was something that was taught to me by every instructor that I had, because going to school is so costly, and if you lose your license, what are you going to do? You can't work in a salon anymore. So it's really about having the courage to say no. I had a couple of clients like that while I was at school, but thankfully I had my teachers to sort of fall back on. I know that won't always be possible through the entirety of the rest of my career, but it definitely gave me a lot to think about, and if I ever feel like it's something I wouldn't do to my own hair, I'm definitely not going to be doing it to the person who's sitting in my chair. No matter how many times they tell me that such and such other stylist has done this a million times, well, then go to them. Last but not least, you have your stingy tippers. And stingy tippers, sometimes you can tell immediately when someone sits in your chair that they're going to gyp you. Other times it comes as a surprise. You have a great conversation with a type 1 talker. I've never gotten a stingy tip from a sleeper. I've gotten it from talkers, I've gotten it from bullies, I've gotten it from, who else? The texters and readers. I think the only ones that never are stingy are the sleepers and or the sort of insecure or sad people, because they really appreciate your work. So that can be surprising when somebody that you think you had a great connection with you think that they really enjoyed your work and they want to come to you again, and they give you $2 or $3 as a tip. That's just dreadful. Service industry workers often make a huge chunk of their salaries through tips, so when you stiff them, you're really screwing them over. It's been through my YouTube tips that I've been able to provide Christmas gifts for my daughter, and I was able to give her a birthday party in November. So these things really matter. You really have to support the people that do your hair, serve you food, or anybody that deserves a tip should get one. When you reach 1,000 hours and you're at the end of your course, Aveda invites each student to ring the gong, and the gong symbolizes the end of one journey and the beginning of the next. It's highly emotional for me. I spent, I would say, a good 30 minutes crying afterwards, because I started September 8th, 2014, and I ended January 14th, 2016. So I was 31 going into school and 33 coming out of school. So it was all of my early 30s was spent in school learning this craft that I love and networking with my classmates, making friends, and sort of honing all these skills that I didn't even know I had. It was also the first time in a long time that I was out of the house and I was doing something just for me, because as a stay-at-home parent, my life sort of centers around my daughter. It still does, obviously, but sometimes you gotta do some stuff for yourself, and being able to go to school was huge in that way. I've been home now and I'm working on my YouTube channel every day. I'm trying to network with other people in New York because I'd like to do some freelance, and I'm just going to see where it goes. So quickly thinking about any cons, pros and cons. So I'll start with the cons because I don't think that there are very many cons. I cut and burned myself constantly. When I was learning how to cut, I would cut the webs of my fingers. Every single student does it. No matter how skilled you are going to burn yourself, cut yourself. You'd stain your hands. My nails were always breaking and full of hair color, so I think my hands were a mess. Towards the end of the course, I had contact dermatitis from the hair color because I don't like to wear gloves when I'm doing color, and that was very painful. Another con was that I didn't get to eat on a normal schedule, and my sleep schedule was super irregular. Towards the end of summer, I converted completely to a night schedule where I slept all day and was awake all night. And when it comes to pros, everything was a pro. I learned that the skills that I came into school with are invaluable. I never really thought very highly of the things that I can do, and I learned in school that things that I am able to do, especially things that I've shared on YouTube, are things that not everybody else can do, and that was amazing to realize that what I already came to school with was valuable, and I just sort of learned how to add to that. and not to mention the friendships. That was amazing. I never expected to make best friends so late in young adulthood. And everything. I can't think of a single thing that would not be a positive. Hope you enjoyed my video. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask. I would love to answer them. I can't recommend Aveda enough. As my teachers and classmates would jokingly say, I have had a sip of the Kool-Aid and I am Aveda for life. I can't recommend the products enough, I can't recommend the services enough, and I hope to be with this company for a very long time. So yeah, that's it. I will see you all in my next video. Bye.